With the holidays quickly approaching and Major League Baseball going into their dead period over the holidays, I think it is the perfect time to take a step back and look at the big picture for the Chicago Cubs. Because after all, there's a lot more than the 2026 season ahead of us. Let's talk about it. You're watching Second City Sports Talk. If we're going to discuss the big picture for this team, we have to start with what lies ahead beyond 2026. And I bring you the intriguing case of the 2027 Cubs. Well, as it stands right now, in 2027, the Cubs have two players and only $32 million committed in guaranteed contracts. Those two players, of course, are Dansby Swanson and Phil Maton, and this is not taking into account your pre-arb players, your arbitration players, and there's a few club options we must discuss as well. As it stands right now, there are four Cubs with contract options in 2027. You have Matthew Boyd, who has a mutual option. You have Colin Ray, who has a club option. You have Carson Kelly, who has a mutual option. And then you have Caleb Thielbar, who also has a mutual option. So, four players right there that could realistically be on the 27 Cubs, but at the same time, they could all be free agents. Well, speaking of free agents, there are currently six players slated to be free agents in 2027. You have Ian Happ, you have Seiya Suzuki, Nico Horner, Holby Milner, Jameson Tyone, and Shota Imanaga. Six contributors right there to your 2026 team are set to be free agents in 2027. Two of those players are your starting outfielders. That is very concerning. That is very uncertain. It leaves a very uncertain path for this team entering 2027. And if you look beyond 2027, the Cubs have one player under a guaranteed contract, and that's Dansby Swanson. So, who's going to play for this team in 2027 and beyond? That is the golden question that we're exploring today. Before we just completely sound the alarm bells off, Pete Crow Armstrong, Michael Busch, Cade Horton, Justin Steele, these pitchers, these position players, these star players are still under team control for many more years beyond 2027. So, there are still bodies on this roster. There are solid players who will be on this roster post-2027. Yet there are still a lot of holes that will need to be filled in 2027. And it just leaves a very uncertain roster, of course, heading into a very uncertain just landscape of baseball beyond 2026 with the looming collective bargaining agreement coming up. At the same time, this situation is a double-edged sword. Yes, the Cubs only have two players under contract, under guaranteed contract entering 2027. But on the other side of it, they only have $55 million committed in those two contracts, meaning if you go off of the current luxury tax, the first tier of the luxury tax, the Cubs have over $200 million to spend in free agency next year before they hit that first tier of the luxury tax. Now, who's to say there's even a luxury tax next year? There's going to be a new CBA. We're probably going to have a lockout. We don't know what the economics of the game are going to look like next year. But as of now, based off of how the Cubs operate, the first tier of the luxury tax has always just been their cap. It's their self-imposed cap. And if you go off of those metrics, they're going to have close to $200 million to spend next year. At the same time, though, this situation is very scary because it's uncertain. Yes, the Cubs have only two players under guaranteed contract heading into 2027. Yes, they're going to have over $200 million to spend if you go off of the current first tier of the luxury tax. But at the same time, you have to see it put into action. You have to see the Cubs go out there, allocate those funds, and make this team better. It's going to be scary. It's going to be uncertain when you only have a very limited number of quality proven players on your roster. You have to see the team go out and add before you can really feel certain about this situation. This may seem like a faraway situation that we're not going to need to talk about until next offseason. But we are seeing the trickle-down effects of the 2027 Cubs and their situation right now heading into 2026. As of this recording on December 19th, the Cubs only have 34 players on their 40-man roster. That's close to being the lowest number in Major League Baseball. They still have around 40 million-ish dollars to that first tier of the luxury tax, their self-imposed salary cap, albeit some of that money is going to be saved for the trade deadline. So maybe around, safely say, $30 million to spend the rest of the offseason. There is money to be spent on this team. There are still 6, as it stands, open spots on the 40-man roster that will definitely change as the season goes on. They will, of course, fill it up by opening day. But there are a plentiful amount of guys on this 40-man roster who I just do not see contributing at the major league level in 2026. Guys like Kevin Alcantara, Luke Little, and Jordan Wicks. Where does their future lie with this team? Right now, I don't really think it's on the Major League Cubs roster. If you look at Kevin Alcantara, right now he's kind of like the 4th or 5th outfielder in this depth chart. I don't really see him having a role on this team in 2026. You have Luke Little as well, who's been given his chances in the bullpen. Lefty, funky arm angle, throws hard, great minor league numbers, yet just really hasn't clicked at the major league level. I was always very high on Luke Little. I thought he was going to be a stud at the back of this bullpen. And as of now, it just seems like his cards have kind of fallen out of stock. Very much like Luke Little, you have Jordan Wicks, except Jordan Wicks was, of course, a very high draft pick coming in the first round out of Kansas State. Lefty, great changeup, solid numbers throughout the minor leagues, yet had his chance in 2024 to be in this rotation every single day. Just an injury-riddled season, never really got a chance to prove himself, and it just seems like he's kind of fallen out of the fold. Had great numbers in AAA last year again. Good minor league pitcher, just like Luke Little, but it hasn't clicked at the major league level, and they both may be running out of time and patience. And then in 2026, you have the golden question of who's DHing for this team on opening day. Now, Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ, Pete Crow Armstrong, those are your de facto 3 starting outfielders. Suzuki will start in right field. Now, right now, battling for DH, you have Tyler Austin, who, crazy to say, who just signed with the Cubs, could be starting at DH on opening day. You have Moises Ballesteros, who does not have a position. He can't catch. He's too short to play first base. And you have Owen Casey, who is this team's consensus #1 overall prospect, and he is going to get at-bats. Whether that's right field or DH or just anywhere in the outfield, I think Owen Casey is going to be getting some priority here, especially over the veteran Austin. But then it just comes down to Moises Ballesteros versus Owen Casey, and the issue here is they are both left-handed bats, so you really cannot platoon them. I don't think we're going to go into spring training with a de facto DH. I think it's going to be a battle in spring. We'll, of course, talk about it when we get there. But as of now, there's a big question mark at DH. Is it going to be Ballesteros, Casey, or Austin, or a player we aren't even naming yet? Somebody that could be brought in via trade or free agency. None of this would have been an issue if the Cubs would have just went out and identified a DH, a top bat, entering the offseason. But under their current financial restrictions, that was never going to happen. We're about to talk about those financial restrictions right now. When it comes to the future spending of this team, we have to look at the current financial restrictions they're putting in place. Here's the known. According to Jesse Rogers, this was an article that came out months ago. The Cubs are not going to give out a $400, $300, just mega million-dollar deal until they know the economic state of the game beyond 2027. That is a known. It is the reason for these self-inflicted financial caps. What is also known, this team has plenty of money available. You know, the "we're breaking even" quote from Tom Ricketts a few years back is just not valid whatsoever. They're worth over $4.5 billion. They're the 4th most valuable franchise in the game. They made over $3 million a game in 2024. There's plenty of cash around. Now we need to see it be put into action. Since we know the known, it's time to look at the uncertain. And much of this uncertainty is surrounding 2027 and the looming CBA and the ultimate lockout that we're probably going to get into because of the CBA. What is the economic state of the game going to look like then? Is there going to be a luxury tax? Is there going to be a salary cap? Salary floor? What is the competitive balance of this league going to look like in 2027 and beyond? And we also have to think about how that competitive balance is going to affect the Cubs. There are 2 ways to view how competitive balance could affect the Cubs. The first is it hurts the Cubs. Look, any competitive balance tax, any sort of thing to level the playing field is going to hurt big market teams like the Cubs. So, in theory, if you bring together, the Pirates, Dodgers, and you make them all even under one playing field, decrease the amount of money you can spend, impose a salary cap, salary floor, it's going to hurt teams like the Cubs. The other view is a bit more cynical, and it's that since the Cubs already act like a mid-market team, spending in the middle of the pack in terms of payroll, a competitive balance really wouldn't affect them because they're not spending like a large market team. Only large market teams are really going to be affected by competitive balance. If the Cubs don't act like a large market team, which they currently aren't doing, then really much isn't going to change. They aren't going to be affected. If anything, they'll benefit from competitive balance because it will force other teams to act like them, develop good players, have a good farm system, and spend smart in free agency. So to really properly examine where this team is going to be spending beyond this season, you have to look at, of course, the CBA, the looming lockout, the economics of baseball. That is without a doubt the biggest factor in why the Cubs are currently not spending. But I think it can be a bit unfair, and I'm not defending him, but I think it can be a bit unfair to criticize Tom Ricketts for not spending huge right before a major change in the economics of baseball. Again, this is the most logical explanation. I am not defending Tom Ricketts. I do not agree with this stance. But if you were owning a business and there was a looming change in the economic just world of that business, you would be reluctant to spend. Now, when this is all over in 2027 and beyond, when we have a clear just vision of what the economics of baseball will look like, then there is no excuse for Tom Ricketts not to be spending, not to be getting these mega deals, not to be putting this team forward like the big market they are. If they still aren't doing that after this lockout, after there's no excuses, there should not be any excuses after the lockout. They're out of excuses. If they are still not spending, then somebody else should be running this team. And if that is what's going to happen after the lockout, if this team is still not going to spend like the third biggest market in the country, then I think it's time to look at the plan and see if it is the best situation going forward. Let's assume again that this team is going to operate as a mid-market franchise. Under their current self-imposed financial restrictions, they're never going to tank. But at the same time, they're never going to go all in. They are stuck in the middle in something called mediocrity. If you're not going to go all in to try to win a championship, but at the same time, you're not going to try to rebuild, go through the draft, do it the quote unquote right way, what are you as a franchise? You don't have a direction. You have to try to win or try to lose. There is no in between. If you are hovering in the middle of those two things, you are mediocre and you are not going to go anywhere in this sport. I know I got in trouble for using this comparison, but in my mind, the Chicago Bulls and Chicago Cubs are ran in very similar ways. Neither the Bulls nor the Cubs are ever going to go all in on a championship. They're never going to put all their chips on the table. They're never going to max out in payroll. But at the same time, they're never going to tank. They're never going to end up top 5 in the lottery, which puts them both in this sphere where they have a very small margin of error. They don't have a lot of financial money to operate with. They aren't going to be picking high in the draft. They're going to have to develop well, and they're stuck in this perpetual position where it's very hard to climb out of being mediocre. The only two ways to do it are really spending big in free agency and tanking and drafting. And those two things are just not something these franchises do. And yes, the Bulls are a heavier extreme. The Cubs have won a playoff series. The Bulls have not. The Cubs have finished above 500. The Bulls have been hovering around 500. But it's just the same premise here. Both teams will never max out on their potential, but they're never going to tank. They're never going to be the worst team in the league. They are stuck in the middle. It's an everlasting cycle. And under Jed Hoyer and Carter Hawkins, that just seems what they're content with. They're content with winning 85 to 87 games a year, building a roster to win 85, 87 games a year, and seeing what happens, which is a very, very dangerous position to be in that leaves you with almost no room for error. Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, they build these teams around outperforming expectations. They're never going to build a 95-win team. It's just not something they believe in. They are going to limit their payroll They're going to develop well, and they're going to put an 85 to 87 win team on the table. Some years, like 2025, they'll outperform expectations. Pete Crow Armstrong, Michael Bush, Seiya Suzuki, they'll have these career years and they'll win 92 games. Other times, it'll turn out like 2023 and 2024, where they underachieve. There's injuries, and the season just goes down the drain. This is not a recipe if you want to win a World Series. You have to develop players well, but also spend money. Look at the Los Angeles Dodgers. Love them or hate them, they are the model franchise. They are what the other 29 teams wish they could be. They are going to develop at a high level, but they are also going to spend money. And right now, under their current situation, the Cubs are miles, years, eons behind the Dodgers in terms of getting close to winning a World Series. As of now, if the Cubs are going to keep operating like a mid-market team with no clear direction, just like their counterparts at the United Center, then they are years away from winning a World Series.